Dexter Avenue Church is to this building.
What's that? Why is that? You don't mind filming this? I'll just make a documentary or something like that.
Yeah.
I won't film you. Don't worry.
Yeah, no
Maybe
worries.
with the conversation.
No worries. What I'm saying is, this is the state capitol. George Wallace was the governor.
Not too long ago.
At the time, Martin Luther King and the other members of Dexter
It was the
Avenue,
Lorraine Motel in
Memphis, yeah.
Where he was assassinated.
Yeah.
But this is where they were organizing.
Actually, no.
The Montgomery.
This is where he became a pastor.
Right.
After the organization, when they walked from Selma to here, he became a pastor. It was the same year, earlier. The year he ended his pastorship, and it's probably because he was assassinated that same year. But this is the church that he became a pastor at. After he was handing the reins over by a black organization at the Mount Zion Black Episcopal Church along the trail, when he was handed presidency of that organization and handed the reins over to be leader of the civil rights movement, around that same time as when he became pastor of this church. And they walked from Selma, and this is where they sat.
Yeah, but no. My point is this.
It's so close to the Capitol.
Martin Luther King's church, when Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat, and the Montgomery bus boycotts were organized by Martin Luther King and others, they were doing it from this church. They were doing it from Dexter Avenue.
It was a Reverend Henry. I got a picture on the sign at the Mount Zion Episcopal Church along the trail. That's what the organization was with, and he was the one who was organizing the rides, and he was the one who was organizing.
No, this is before the rides.
I know. He was organized. They were organizing it from there because there was a walk.
Yeah, I'm talking about 10 years before that.
Yeah.
I'm talking about 1955.
Yeah.
Okay.
I can show you the picture.
Yeah. I mean, the marches were happening later. I mean, Selma to Montgomery happened later.
Okay, but there was another one before that, from Selma to Montgomery. They never made it far, and they didn't even make it across the bridge. That was before Martin Luther King took the reins.
That's right. Okay, I hear you.
I know my history.
Hear you. Okay, but it's still. I mean, there was activism and organization happening at Dexter Avenue Church.
It was too,
and it was steps away from George Wallace, the governor, at the time, who was declaring segregation now, segregation forever, in the shadow of Jefferson Davison's statue glorifying
Jefferson
segregation.
Davis became the president. He was
of the entire Confederacy.
Yeah.
And you can almost spit and reach Dexter Avenue Church. So that's what I'm the courage of these people.
Yes.
I mean, the courage and the conviction.
You want to know how hard and heinous it really was?
How hard
it wasn't,
and how courageous
that
had to be to do that. I mean, look, this is like 100 yards.
That's right.
I mean, it's nothing.
It's the only thing that's up here that's not a government building.
Yes, it's nothing. It's right there, right?
Yeah, that's the reason he got killed.
You know.
Well, he's basically he's spitting their eye from right there next to him.
Yeah.
But
it's amazing. It is.
I mean, I didn't. For my entire life, this is my first time seeing Dexter Avenue Baptist Church.
This is the first time?
Yes, I live in Seattle.
Ooh.
And all this time, for my entire life,
from New Jersey originally.
Okay.
I didn't learn.
But hear me out here. Hear me out here. I thought. Hear me out here. For my entire life, I thought Dexter Avenue Baptist Church was within a black community. Okay.
Everybody. That's right.
I mean, I thought
that's a great point.
That's a great point. I thought that all of this was going on, within. I mean, I use the word safety advisedly,
Right.
you know, but
Yeah.
but you know, even in Seattle, well, you know, Seattle's been gentrified, but back in the day, you know, there was a black community, in
Yeah.
the Central District, and the
Right.
black churches in that Central
That's right.
District,
Yeah.
and black people attend those black churches in the Central District, and I just assumed
That's right.
that was the story of Dexter Avenue.
We're the
Baptist
best place to make
church.
a difference.
But-
right in the midst of them.
But to be
Yeah.
within steps
Yeah.
of the state capitol
Yeah, that's
at a time when it was the absolute symbol. Actually, it gets deeper than that. Dexter Avenue Baptist Church is sandwiched in between the state capitol and the state Supreme Court.
Yep.
So this is a time when the law is enforcing segregation.
right.
The law is being used as a tool
Right.
to subjugate black people.
Right.
And so you have George Wallace on one end. On the other side of this church, you've got the Supreme Court, the
Right.
highest law in the land
Right.
of Alabama, enforcing segregation.
Right.
And you have this little church.
I want to show you
That's
something.
trying
That's
to make a
that's where the
difference.
word courage is coming from.
That's where courage
Yes.
comes in.
Yeah.
That's the Mount Zion Black Episcopal Church along the trail. If you read the bottom, right there being Martin Luther King Jr., elected vice president, right there. Bennett also served on the transportation committee. Well, wait, okay. And the formation was crucial to, I have to get the other picture, for the people during the bus boycott. So it was the Mount Zion Episcopal Church where they organized it, but they did still do activism in there.
Yeah. Right here.
Yeah.
Right here.
Right in the spit
Yeah.
eye of the
Yeah,
government.
in the spitting eye of the government.
Well, it was the best place to
You
make
know,
a change.
you know,
right in the midst of it.
But you know, this isn't 2019. Okay, this isn't even 1975. I mean, this is 1955.
You want
Okay,
know
this is
even
like
today.
free.
Even today, even though they gave blacks the right to certain things, check it out. They never changed the law. So anytime they decide, they just gave you the information, but they never changed the law.
I learned that yesterday. I was at the Reconciliation Museum, and oh my God!
They never
For the first time, I learned the Alabama state constitution still sanctions segregation
Yep.
of students in schools, segregated schools.
I just told her that too.
Yeah, he just told me
Segregated
that. I
schools.
didn't know that. I didn't
Do you
know.
know
I
if a
could-
business owner decides to enforce that law and know about it, they can stop you from coming in
I
the store.
could not believe it. I was like, wait a minute. This and it is purposeful, because on two separate occasions there have been referendums
Yep.
to remove that language,
Yep.
and it's been defeated.
Every time. You want to
You
know
know?
why? Because if you don't know your history and you don't know that they took it out of place, that's still a tool that they can use if nobody knows. And later on, say, well, this is an alarm, reinstitute it. They're still segregating some schools. Some private schools, some public schools. They're still pushing forward to segregate the whites from the blacks.
Yeah.
They want different schools. And it happened in Florida. Because there are certain states that even though they have to go by government guidelines,
Yeah.
they still haven't conformed fully to the union, so they can, within their state, make laws as long as it doesn't overstep what the federal government put in place. Any law that they put in place and the federal government has not changed,
Yeah.
they can still use it.
Well, you know, it was really, it was powerful. I think it was on one of the videos, and a young woman says, "States' rights to do what? To do what? What are we talking about when you say the Civil War was about states' rights?
It wasn't.
Well, states' rights to treat black people as something less than human for economic gain.
Somebody to step on.
The entire economy of the South.
Are you crying, or is it because of the weather?
I think it's a combination of the two. I'm
Yeah.
very emotional about this.
I had no
I'm very
allergies or
emotional
nothing.
about this.
I came down here.
And to think, and it's the economy only works with free labor.
Right.
You can't force people to work for free unless you visit upon them violence.
Well, not only that,
and
you want to know what else they use?
and a narrative that puts forward a point of view that they're not really people.
Well, the
you see what I'm
Constitution
saying?
says that
they're not
one
really people. That they're somewhere in that neighborhood of mules, and so that gives you your Christian sensibility, the ability to beat, maim, rape, separate mothers from their babies,
now you
and
see what I
fathers
was
from
saying
their
about
children.
that area and that sign.
All of that, but you have to have a narrative that makes that okay. You have to have a narrative that says it's okay for up to 3,000 people to gather in a city square and lynch somebody in a crucify him fashion.
Do you know?
And call
last
yourself
year
a
they
Christian.
tried to do the same thing.
I mean, it takes some emotional and mental gymnastics.
You know that the
to get
government
there.
tried to have a. They said they wanted to have a public lynching
Because even
of
with
a
the
black person that was in office.
With the Holocaust or Japanese internment, what in the case of Germans, in the case of Americans, were able to do was it was going on somewhere else, right? They could say they could go through the emotional and mental sort of. That's not about me, or that's or some other thing, right? Something that was happening all around them, right? But here, the difference here is people got excited about their violence. I mean, they actively participated in the violence. They celebrated the violence.
I can show you
they
pictures.
Celebrated the violence.
I can show you pictures where they're standing there and smiling.
I mean, that's the difference.
And setting somebody on fire on the ground. They're standing there posing.
That's the difference.
And smiling.
And that's the difference. And the young woman from South Africa who was giving us a talk yesterday said at the Reconciliation Museum. She said the thing about being a South African that I had to sort of readjust how I think about these issues in the United States was in South Africa, as bad as it was, and it was bad. Under Mandela, there was a process of reconciliation that included people developing a common language to talk about what had happened.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? A common language, and it was invited to talk about it. You know what I mean? And not everybody was bought in, but many were. And there were mechanisms for the former oppressors to apologize and atone for what had happened, right? Right?
They made
but
Mandela
here,
had to be a tyrant, but it wasn't always so.
Yeah, but here, there's no language. In fact, there are huge swaths of the U.S. population that would swear up and down it never happened. Okay, and you have, you know, and there is no, you know, our history books today are teaching a false narrative. You know,
they say the Holocaust didn't happen.
And right here in Montgomery, Montgomery is Montgomery, because white immigrants came in here, murdered, and ran off those who they did not murder,
the Indians,
Native Americans, and then on top of that atrocity, made this a major center for the slave trade.
You know,
so it's like a double. I mean, it's you know, it's like it's a microcosm of sort of America's story, because America's story is America isn't America without the three legs of the stool. Okay, you have the immigrant story. Okay, but we are not a nation solely of immigrants. We are a nation of immigrants, of Native Americans, indigenous people, and of the progeny of slaves who came here as property, as something less than human. It is, by definition, the antithesis of immigration.
Do you know the Memorial of Peace and Justice? Why they still call it the Lynching Museum? The richest man in Montgomery bought that land. He tore down the biggest slave warehouse and the biggest slave trading area. When they graded the ground, they found bones in it.
Wow.
From slaves that had been killed and lynched there. And there were protests by students. There were protests by a lot of people who came here because of that. And that's why they built that museum, glorifying that area, even though how heinous it was. And they're not telling people readily what that area was, where they put the museum at. But they still, you know what I mean?
I have a friend. I mean, I love her. I mean, I'm an Army brat, and
Army brat.
And one of my fellow brats actually lives in Montgomery, and she's a great woman. She's you know, she's socially evolved and all this, but you know, the whole waterfront area that's, you know, looks so nice, and she, you know, and I said, well, you know, Commerce Street, the commerce was African slaves. I mean, that was the commerce of Commerce. And she says, well, she says,
they wouldn't bring them during
she says,
the day
well,
on
you know,
top of the street.
cotton came through there. I said, well, yeah, cotton came through there, but
But
slaves. I mean, you know, it's like, I was like, you know
used.
where I said, and she lives here. I said, you know where that Hank Williams Museum is right now?
Right next to it.
That's right next to
Justice
Hank
Affiliate
Williams.
Building, 122 Commerce was a slave warehouse.
It was the slave warehouse.
They
right?
just put that sign back there a couple of months ago.
So the river, you come up from the river with this human commerce. Right?
Well, during the day they marched through the tunnels.
And then you have the auction. In
During the
Chelsea.
day they marched through
Probably
the
is the
tunnel.
most profitable business at that point was the slave trade.
It was.
Totally.
It was.
Totally.
It was.
It